Most people think they're stuck because they don't know what to do. They're not. They're stuck because they can't see clearly enough to know what matters. And until you know what matters, every option feels equally important. Every decision feels exhausting. Clarity changes everything.
Big time.
Have you ever noticed that some people know exactly what matters while everyone else stays busy? Not smarter, not more talented, just clear. Most people aren't lost, they're interrupted. Richard Hamming was a mathematician at Bell Labs during its golden age, one of the most concentrated collections of raw intellect in the history of science. You could not throw a rock at Bell Labs at that time and not hit a genius. In fact, if you threw a rock and didn't hit a genius, it means it just landed on the floor. Everybody there was brilliant. Everybody there had Nobel Prizes, Fields medals. It was a truly incredible field of talent. Richard invented the error-correcting code that made digital computing reliable. But he's less remembered for that than for the question he used to ask at lunch. He noticed something that bothered him. Men with identical intellectual firepower were meeting completely different fates. A handful became legends, and the rest faded into forgotten file cabinets. Some of those guys would retire, and 5 years later, their own coworkers couldn't remember who they were. They had the same raw material, but wildly different outcomes. So he started studying the lunchroom. He watched his fellow mathematicians sitting together, comfortably solving polite little puzzles, working hard, always busy, always productive, and he picked up his tray and moved to the physics table. He listened, and then he started asking uncomfortable questions. First was, what are the most important problems in your field? They'd lean in and list them eagerly. Then he'd ask, why aren't you working on them? It was a violently unwelcome question. Nobody wants to be reminded over a midday meal that they're wasting their brief singular life on trivialities just to feel productive. The physicist eventually banished him from their table, tired of the indigestion he brought with him, but the exile gave Hamming the exact answers he was looking for. The lost ones were always busy, working on things that they knew they could solve because the illusion of progress kept the dread at bay. The legends, however, had the stomach to sit in the dark, wrestle with the impossible, and risk total failure. Greatness, he concluded, wasn't about having a better engine in your head. It wasn't about more IQ. It was just the stubborn, terrifying courage to only swing at the things that actually mattered. Hamming discovered that most people aren't avoiding failure, they're avoiding importance.
Wow.
So what is clarity? Most people think clarity means having all the answers. It doesn't. Clarity means knowing what deserves your attention, and those are two very different things. Certainty is often a defense mechanism, a way of closing the aperture so that you don't have to deal with what's actually there. Clarity is an orientation. It means knowing who you are, why you're here, and what to do next, even when the path ahead is still forming. Think about what daily life actually does to you. The inbox, the calendar, notifications, endless streams of obligations, they keep you at ground level, so focused on the immediate that the shape of your life becomes invisible. You're busy, responsive, maybe even productive, but somewhere in all that motion, the questions that matter most never get asked. Who am I? Why am I here? And what am I avoiding? These aren't philosophical luxuries. They're navigational questions. And without clarity, most people never ask them honestly because they're too busy producing the illusion of progress. Peter Thiel, one of the founders of PayPal, talks about optimizing your life for things that don't have diminishing returns, things that are durable, things like meaning, philosophy, relationships, the pursuit of wealth rather than money, lifestyle rather than career, the questions that compound instead of expire. The point isn't that your daily work doesn't matter. It's that without clarity, you can't tell the difference between what truly matters and what merely occupies you.
ties so beautifully into so many things that we've been talking about the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's amazing how I do that, huh?
Yeah, it's like you're a professional or something.
Yeah, this isn't the podcast that I had planned at all. I had a very logical map laid out. My intuition was like, this one is the one that's next. And I was like, no, it's not. I don't want to do this one next. I want to do the one that I've planned next because that's what makes sense. And my intuition said, yeah, shelve it. Do what you're told. So once again, I'm following the intuition of the divine against my will.
That's usually how it goes for me too.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, nobody ever gets a message from the Lord and goes, man, that sounds great.
How refreshing.
Yeah. Job didn't jump into the mouth of the whale because he was delighted to hear his next assignment from the Lord. Hey, go preach to the people of Nineveh. Yeah, that's a big no thank you.
Are you sure?
How about I escape first? And that brings us to Ariadnes' thread. In Greek mythology, Theseus enters the labyrinth to face the Minotaur in Crete. The maze is specifically designed to be disorienting. Every quarter looks like every other quarter. Every turn leads deeper into confusion. There's no vantage point. There's no map. And there's no way to reason your way out because the whole architecture is built to defeat reason. What saves him isn't strength or intelligence, it's thread. Ariadne gives him a spool of golden thread at the entrance, and he unwinds it as he goes. And when his fight with the Minotaur is over and he's successful, he pulls on that thread and he follows it back out. The thread is clarity. It's not a map of the entire labyrinth. It certainly doesn't show him what's around the next corner. It's just a single, continuous connection point back to the entrance, back to source, back to himself, and back to what he knew before the maze swallowed him. This is what confusion actually feels like from the inside. You're not lost in open space where you could theoretically see in all directions. You're in a labyrinth, a maze, a structure specifically designed to make you feel like you're making progress when all you're doing is walking in circles. The anxiety isn't, I don't know what to do. It's the vertigo of not being able to trust your own perception. Many people respond to this by moving faster. More research, more options, more input, more busyness, but speed without clarity is going the wrong direction faster. Or they check out and play video games and Netflix and chill and do nothing with their life. Clarity is the thread. It doesn't show you the whole maze. It keeps you connected to the entrance, to your values, priorities, your, dare I say, your authentic self, so that no matter how deep you go, you can find your way back. And from that connection, the right moves start to become visible, not all at once, just the next one. What is the next step that you have to take? And when you live from clarity, people trust your energy. They trust that authenticity, not just your words. Your presence becomes their permission to be uncertain, and your focus lights their path home. As James Clear writes, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. I recommend you vote for clarity. So why is clarity so hard to come by? Here's what gets in the way of clarity. Exhaustion will cloud it. When you're depleted, everything feels equally urgent and nothing feels meaningful. I was recently fairly sick, and during that sickness, it was very difficult to think clearly. Just everything was confusing pretty much all day, so you need to get your rest. Fear will cloud clarity too, especially the fear of what you might see if you actually looked, because sometimes clarity reveals that the job isn't right, this relationship that you're in has run its course, or you've been avoiding the most important problem in your life for years. Clarity doesn't always deliver welcome news. Then there's cognitive dissonance, the quiet conflict between competing beliefs. I want financial freedom, but I believe people with money are selfish. Or, as the risen I talked about a couple weeks ago, I want to be seen, but I believe standing out makes me obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
The contradiction muddles the signals, and you can't follow a thread that's tied in a knot. For some people, attention itself is part of the challenge. The architecture of the mind can make sustained focus on what matters genuinely hard. But the labyrinth is real for everyone, regardless of how they ended up inside it. What all these obstacles share is that they can't be solved by thinking harder. More analysis poured into a muddy signal only produces more sophisticated confusion. What you need is a different approach. Everybody following along at home, what do you think the different approach is that I'm going to recommend? 10,000 quataloos to the winner. If you guessed breathwork, you got it right.
Surprise.
If you can't see me, I'm doing jazz hands. And this is where breathwork comes in. Most people try to think their way to clarity, but clarity isn't the first step. Calm comes first, then connection, and then clarity. You cannot see clearly from a nervous system that's in survival mode. Calm opens the door, connection invites you in, and clarity shows you the way. That's the path. And the sequence matters because clarity can't be forced. You think your way to it while agitated or frantic. You can't access it while you're disconnected from your body and your energy and your own experiences. The first thing breathwork does is calm the nervous system. The physiological stress response begins to release. The monkey mind goes silent. Relaxation isn't the goal, it's preparation for what's next. From that calm, connection becomes possible. You begin to distinguish your own signal and energy from the noise. What do you actually feel? What do you desire in life? Not what you've been told to desire, not what you've rehearsed, your signal and your energy. And from that connection, clarity emerges. Sometimes you come in seeking clarity about a decision, a relationship, or a direction in life, and other times clarity arrives unexpectedly. Someone comes seeking abundance and discovers what's blocking it. Someone comes seeking energy and discovers what's draining it. The breath goes where it's needed, and the breath is the golden thread that will guide you through the labyrinth. The thinking mind is often just a random number generator inside the maze. This is why breathwork isn't just about relaxation. It creates the conditions for clarity. Calm first, connection second, and then clarity has somewhere to land. The opposite of clarity isn't confusion, it's distraction. And most people aren't lost, they're interrupted.
I have a comment, but I don't want it on record.
I definitely want that on record. Let's hear that comment. Let me turn the camera around first.
Oh, Jesus. No, just that we've had, I'm building skills to build a business, and so many times in the last, year and a half since I really started talking seriously about doing something, you have told me many times, hey, professional development is personal development. And that has landed like a ton of bricks on several occasions in the last, since October. And it's been a struggle just dealing with a lot of my own personal weight that stuff that holds me back. It has to be worked through so I can do what I want to do to get where I want to go. And I kind of just feel like you were talking earlier about how your intuition was like, hey, this is what needs to happen today. And this super pompous, very arrogant side of me is, thanks, Spirit. This was just for me. Awesome. Great.
Okay. Stricken from the record, the minister cedes the rest of their time to the good fellow across the aisle who has never had a thought worth remembering. If you ever watch the lower house in England, as I have on C-SPAN, because I'm a nerd, they will say things like that to each other.
Really?
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
Hilarious.
Also, back to the record. What clarity makes possible? When you're clear, a few things happen that are hard to produce any other way. You get your energy back, not just physical energy, you get that as well, the energy that comes from alignment, from not spending 30% of your cognitive resources managing the background hum of unresolved issues. When your priorities are clear, you stop auditioning every task for its importance. You know what matters, and you do what matters. The rest waits or disappears. I'm often amazed at how many of the priorities that I need to get done, if I just ignore them and focus on what's important, simply vanish. This brings us to
task.
Yes. This brings us to the 80-20 principle, that 20% of your effort creates 80% of the result. And then if we use that 80-20 principle, only works when you can actually see which 20% is doing the work. Clarity is what allows you to see that. And then clarity also unlocks the next step towards self-awareness, which is courage. A confused mind always says no. That was one of the big things that we learned in sales is that if the prospect is confused, they're going to say no. Most overthinking isn't a thinking problem, it's a clarity problem wearing the costume of thoroughness. When you can see what actually matters, the decision that felt paralyzing often becomes obvious. The path was always there. The fog was the problem, not the terrain. You get a kind of contentment that isn't dependent on circumstances. This one usually surprises people. Clarity doesn't just help you plan better, it helps you see what's already true. When you're no longer being distorted by fear or confusion, what's in front of you becomes visible. And what's in front of most people most of the time is more than enough. The dissatisfaction was the blur, not the reality.
That kind of goes back to the metaphor you had about the Greek mythology and being stuck in the labyrinth and not being able to see what's around the corner. Clarity doesn't mean that there are no unknowns. It just means that there's a path.
Correct.
Yeah. I think that is sometimes misunderstood. Clarity means that I understand all the options and I know like all of the paths and I understand everything and there are no unknowns. And I think that is ultra rare, if ever that happens in life.
Yeah, this is the analogy that I use. This is like waiting to leave. You're not going to leave your house until all the stoplights are green between here and work. Hey, once every stoplight between here and where I'm going is green, then I'll leave.
Yeah.
And that's not how it works.
Yeah. You've used that one on me before. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Classic for a reason.
Classically not enjoyed.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And underneath all that is purpose. The sense that your actions are connected to something bigger than you. Something you've chosen, something that reflects who you are. Knowing why you're doing something is what separates motion from momentum. Clarity is what makes the why visible. So how do we build a life that invites clarity? Breathwork may be the most direct path to clarity, but clarity is also a daily discipline. You either build structures and systems that support it or habits that quietly erode it. So first, you need to create margin. You need to create space. Your best ideas rarely arrive when you're trying to have them. When I sit down and go, okay, it's time to have good ideas, nothing shows up. They arrive when you're on a walk or in the shower, in the spaces between obligations. That's not an accident. Insight needs room to land. If your days have no white space, your mind has no white space. Say that again. If your day doesn't have any white space, your mind doesn't have any white space.
Somebody shared about that in Breathworks the other day, about how he realized he's always, like, something is always going on or there's always noise in the background. Like, it dawned on him for the first time how often his brain really gets to rest, and he was surprised by how little it was and how much better he felt when he allowed that to happen, when he made time and space for that.
Yeah. As a somewhat strategy sales guy, sales, marketing, strategy, not really so much operations, but the systems of sales. The best work that I've done, like the Magnus Opus project that I created, is I basically went into the office every day, worked for about an hour with a team, and then went and sat in my office and stared at a whiteboard. And just stared at that whiteboard for 3 months. And then after 3 months of staring at that whiteboard, came out and said, all right, I have the answer. And it was marvelous. Which, by the way, in the business world, when you have a good idea, you have this Hollywood imaginary scenario that you're going to like, hey guys, I have the solution that is going to solve everything. And we're going to be making money hand over fist. I had that Hollywood imagination that everybody's going to jump up, they're going to clap you on the back, they're going to put you on their shoulders, there's going to be a big huzzah, and there'll be a little parade. And And what it actually sounds like is complete silence because nobody can think of a way to shoot it down. It's very disappointing. Yeah. Every magnificent idea I've had that like actually worked out, when I laid it out, nobody celebrated.
Oh man, that's kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah, that's corporate America for you.
That's a
How
bummer.
dare you bring a real solution to this organization?
Yeah. Also, having ideas in a room where everybody's just looking for a way to like, kick it in the nards. That
Yes.
sucks.
That is also corporate America.
Gross.
Yeah, you've tried to move the ball forward. We must immediately kneecap you.
Ugh, I'm so glad I'm not a manager.
Second thing we're going to do is focus on one thing at a time. Multitasking isn't efficiency. It's being partially present everywhere and fully present nowhere. Clarity requires attention, and attention requires protection. Third, get things out of your head. When the same thought keeps circling, write it down. The page can hold what the mind is exhausting itself trying to hold. Once it's written, you can think about it instead of thinking from inside it. Getting Things Done by David Allen. He has a very good quote that the brain is great for having ideas, not holding ideas. And that's true for positive or negative ideas. A positive idea, we like to think of that as creative, and a negative idea is usually rumination. Fourth, reduce input. When everything starts to feel noisy, step back. Take a walk, sit in silence. The signal doesn't get clearer from more input, it gets clearer from less. I particularly enjoy Ryan Holiday, who writes The Daily Stoic, has a quote about, I've never felt worse after a walk. And that's usually when I do my thinking, is when I go on my morning walk. I don't put on headphones, I don't listen to music, I just walk in silence and contemplate. And the final practice, trust the first signal. The clearest answer often arrives before the analysis. The mind tends to negotiate with what the gut already knows. That's one of the reasons I encourage journaling after breath work. It gives you insights, somewhere to live, and it also makes them real. One of the other things about that first signal is like when you're taking test-taking strategies, they always say, whatever your first guess is, go with it, because that's the one that's right. And then people start to think about it and go, it could be this. And then they talk themselves out of the right answer. Clarity isn't built through complexity. It's built through attention. Protect the signal, and the next step usually reveals itself. And this brings us to the 3 questions that we opened with. All of this eventually resolves into 3 questions. They're not new questions. Hamming was asking versions of these back at the physics table, and every person who is seeking eventually finds their way back to them. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I avoiding? Every meaningful life eventually returns to these questions. And the clarity isn't in the asking. It's in what surfaces when the noise clears and you're willing to hear the answer. Everyone sees the unseen in proportion to the clarity of his heart, and that depends upon how much he has polished it. Rumi. The world is a function of your inner condition, not your intelligence, not how hard you're working, the clarity of your lens. And clarity isn't about having all the answers. It's about being present enough to hear the real questions. It's about following the thread back through the labyrinth, not with a map, not with certainty, but with a continuous connection to what's true. Clarity doesn't show you the whole labyrinth, it shows you the next step. Hamming's colleagues weren't unintelligent. In fact, they were literal geniuses, but they were unpolished. They let comfort substitute for clarity and motion substitute for direction. The legends were willing to sit in the dark with what mattered. The darkest cave hides the greatest treasure. Raid that cave. Clarity is your torch. And as always, we'll close it out with a poem. This is titled As Kingfishers Catch Fire by Gerald Manley Hopkins. And a kingfisher is a type of brightly colored bird that appears iridescent, and it likes to dive into water, so it sparkles when it comes out of the water and sunshine hits it.
That's awesome.
As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame, as tumbled over rim in roundy wells. Stones ring like each tuck string tells, each hung bells. Bells sung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Deals out that being indoors each one dwells. Selves, go itself. Myself it speaks and spells. Crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more, the just man justices, keeps grace, that keeps all his going graces, acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is. Christ, for Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. And that was As Kingfishers Catch Fire by Gerald Manley Hopkins. We spend our brief singular lives sitting at comfortable tables solving polite little puzzles just to keep the dread of the labyrinth at bay. We mistake the endless motion of our inbox for momentum, and we let our overly analytical minds act as random number generators in the dark. But as Gerald Manley Hopkins reminds us, you didn't come here to circle the maze. He writes that each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Selves, goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. That is what clarity is. It's not an intellectual strategy or a 5-year plan. It's the raw physical alignment that happens when you drop out of the frantic noise of your head and follow the golden thread of the breath back into the body and finally remember who you were before the world tried to tell you who you should be. When you clear the fog, you stop managing the background hum of unresolved questions, and you start dealing out the unique being that dwells inside your own marrow. You stop pretending, you stop conforming, and you begin to act out exactly what you are. Hamming's colleagues weren't short on intellect. They were just unpolished. They chose the comfort of the midday meal over the terrifying courage of the real questions. Don't substitute motion for direction anymore. Polishing the heart is a daily discipline, and the breath is your manual override. Raid that cave. Find your thread. How you breathe is how you live. Take a big, clear breath.